Miss Banks pulls lots of pranks. Chapter 2. Spelling can be tricky. Okay, let's start with spelling, Miss Banks announced after we pledged the allegiance. You kids are going to become great spellers in 4th grade. I love spelling, said Andrea, who loves anything to do with school. Me too, said Emily, who loves everything Andrea loves. That's great, said Miss Banks, because spelling is very important. If you want to get ahead in the world, you need to know how to spell. But spelling can also be tricky. For instance, who can spell the word spell? Ooh, ooh, ooh! Andrea looked like she was going to pop a lung if Miss Banks didn't call on her. Spell is spelled S-P-E-L-L, Andrea said proudly. As if that was hard. Any dumbhead knows how to spell the word spell. Very good, Andrea, said Miss Banks. Now, can you spell the word misspell? M-I-S-P-E-L-L, said Andrea. No, sorry, said Miss Banks. There are 2 S's in misspell. You spelled spell correctly, but you misspelled misspell. See what I mean about spelling being tricky? Andrea looked mad, like it was Miss Banks' fault that she misspelled misspell. It may have been the first time in her life that little Miss Perfect made a mistake. Let's try another one, said Miss Banks. Who can spell the word wrong? AJ, how about you? Sure, I said. I can spell any word wrong. Everybody laughed, even though I didn't think I said anything funny. Go ahead, AJ, said Miss Banks. Spell it. I-T, I said. It. No, said Miss Banks. Spell the word wrong. What word? I asked. Wrong, said Miss Banks. How can I be wrong? I complained. I didn't even spell the word yet. I mean spell the word wrong, AJ, said Miss Banks. Like when you do something wrong? Oh, I said. That's different. R-O-N-G. I'm sorry, said Miss Banks. That's wrong. But you told me to spell the word wrong, I complained. I mean, you spelled wrong, said Miss Banks. I can spell wrong, shouted Andrea. Wrong is spelled W-R-O-N-G. That's right, Andrea, said Miss Banks. No, I said. Right is R-I-G-H-T. Andrea's wrong. Well, you spelled right, AJ, said Miss Banks, but you spelled wrong. Andrea spelled wrong right, and... Miss Banks stopped for a moment, took a handkerchief out of her pocket, and wiped her forehead with it. Okay, I'm gonna pass out. She's gonna pass out, Michael shouted. Call an ambulance. Give her air, shouted Alexia. I'm going to pass out sheets of paper, continued Miss Banks. Oh, they should definitely have different ways to say pass out. We're going to have a little spelling test, said Miss Banks, to see how well you spell. Oh, I hate tests. We all took out pencils as Miss Banks passed around the papers. I'm going to say 10 words, said Miss Banks. You try to spell them. Ready? It seemed simple enough. Is there a prize for the winner? Asked Andrea, who loves winning prizes. She probably has a trophy room at home with all the prizes she's won. No, said Miss Banks. This is just for fun. Your first word is birth. What? What's a birth? Whispered Neil. I never heard of a birth, but teachers always tell us that if we can't spell a word, we should try to sound it out. I wrote B-U-R-F on my paper. The next word is Spinkheimer, said Miss Banks. That's a tough one. I tried to sound it out. It wasn't easy. The next word is Splorgle. Can you use that in a sentence? Asked Alexia. Sure, said Miss Banks. Please sparkle the dungle before it runs out of Plark. What? She asked us to spell a bunch of other words. Boonch, Carpendoodle, Floggenberger. I never heard of any of those words. Wait a minute, said Alexia. You made those words up. Don't be silly, said Miss Banks. I've learned a lot of words in my 142 years. This spelling test is really hard, Andrea complained. Andrea was probably afraid she was going to fail a test for the first time in her life. Then she won't get into Harvard. At the end, we passed our papers forward. Miss Banks collected them. Then she did the weirdest thing in the history of the world. She ripped our spelling tests in half and threw them in the garbage can. What? Aren't you going to grade our spelling tests? Asked Emily. Why should I? Miss Banks replied. None of those words are real. I made them all up. Let's move on. Can anybody spell the words race car backward? Ooh, I can, shouted Little Miss Know-It-All. Race car backwards is RACECAR. It's a palindrome, which is a word or phrase that's spelled the same way backward and forward. Andrea smiled the smile she smiles to let everybody know she knows something nobody else knows. Very good, Andrea, said Miss Banks. And can you spell race car upside down? Huh? Andrea looked puzzled. We all did. Miss Banks got down on the floor, and then she stood on her head. RACECAR, she said. That's race car, upside down. Then she got back on her feet again. Do you kids know what a word search is? She asked. Of course I know what a word search is. It's when you have a bunch of letters on a page and you have to find the words that are hidden in the letters. Miss Banks passed out another sheet of paper for each of us. There are 10 words hidden in this grid, she told us. See if you can find them. Andrea grabbed her paper and got to work. I could see that she was excited. She loves to be first at stuff because that means she can feel like she's better than everybody else. I'll be back in a minute, said Miss Banks, and she left the class. I looked at the sheet. That word search was hard. Did you find any words yet? Ryan whispered to me. No, I said. I don't see any. Me neither, said Andrea. Wow. If Miss Know-It-All can't find the words, nobody can. Is Nana and a boo-boo a word? Asked Alexia. I don't think so, replied Neil. Miss Banks came back into the class. We're doing a word search. We can't find the words, I shouted. I looked all over the grid, said Michael. The only thing that even looks like a word is Nana and a boo-boo. You're right, replied Miss Banks. So Nana and a boo-boo on you. Huh? Said Emily. Why did you give this to us? Well, said Miss Banks, I said it was a word search. I didn't say it was a word find. I think you learned a valuable life lesson here. You can search forever, but sometimes you won't find what you're looking for. That's when the weirdest thing in the history of the world happened. I looked out the window and saw it was snowing outside. That was weird. It was September. Miss Banks' cell phone rang. Excuse me, she told us. I need to take this important call. It's from Mrs. Stoker, the principal. Miss Banks listened for a minute, and then she said into the phone, Okay, so we're leaving at 10 o'clock? What? I looked at the clock. It was a few minutes before 10. Yes, snow day. This was the greatest day of my life. Everybody was hooting and hollering. Woohoo! We all rushed to get our coats and backpacks from our cubbies. What are you kids doing? Asked Miss Banks. We're getting ready to go home, I told her. Why? Asked Miss Banks. It's not dismissal time. The day just started. But we heard you on the phone with Mrs. Stoker, said Ryan. You said, April Fools, shouted Miss Banks. What? It's not April, shouted Neil. Every day is April Fool's Day to me, said Miss Banks. Man, Miss Banks pulls lots of pranks.